Hello, I'm Jane Vowles.
I'm Pami Natterson.
I am Sheila Ojeda.
I'm Kirsten Patterson.
I am Kamala Rampersad de Silva.
This is Kali Chui. As CEO of this institute, I am pleased to be collaborating with other female leaders
who are working incredibly hard to improve governance practices in their regions.
It is noteworthy that even as the challenges of COVID-19 are impacting our governance practices,
in many boardrooms, women's voices are absent,
silent,
or go unheard.
Yet, it is clear that the economic impact of COVID-19 is devastating.
Not only in terms of the estimated $90 trillion lost globally,
but as we see happening in some countries,
emotions are running high with respect to dealing with very fundamental decisions
like economic recovery,
reopening borders,
vaccinations,
and freedom of choice.
We cannot afford to lose out on the contribution women can make
to solve some of these problems.
We welcome you
as you join us in this 3-part series
on women in governance to bring positive change.
Positive change.
Positive change.
A change where we embrace all our voices
so that we can all contribute effectively to making governance worldwide more effective,
inclusive,
and diverse.
In other words, let's stop competing
and begin collaborating.
Let's help solve many of these problems.
Thank you for that welcome and a good day, everyone. It is really a pleasure for me to be here this morning, more so because this area is something that I am deeply committed to. You know, gender diversity is extremely important if we as a region, as the world, will have to grow. And, you know, when I was asked to give this presentation, I looked at globally what was happening. And if we believe that women leadership in corporate boards is advancing beyond a snail pace, we really need to think again. And especially in this period of COVID, overcoming barriers to equal opportunity and fairness, slow pace of change, unconscious bias, effectiveness and moral persuasion invites urgent success. We really need to find those successes. There are 2 schools of thought on the reason focus must be placed on gender diversity on corporate boards. The first speak to the financial improvement of the firm, the business case. Many times when we look at studies, it says there is no business case. You know, so we look at, for example, organizations such as McKinsey and Wharton School of Business. And it appears that there is really a divergence in the views in respect to the business case for having women on board, with some studies showing a positive correlation between improvement in profitability with the addition of women on boards, while others have concluded that there is no such relationship between gender diversity and company performance. They say it is weak. Hence, one is led to the position that there is no real alignment on this matter. However, I don't think that should daunt us. It is really impatient of the debate that based on equity and fairness, more competent women deserve opportunity to sit on corporate boards. Our society really just cannot afford the 2-tiered system where, you know, you find this. Every child, especially in the Caribbean, despite gender, has access to the same schools. They have access to the same universities. They are graded the same way in respect to academic excellence. But now, because of gender, the female in that equation cannot rise to have that equal opportunity for representation at the board level. Much has to do, as we know, with tradition and the retention of the status quo, which is largely driven by unconscious bias towards male leadership and first movers advantage. Now, there's a lot of articles that have been written about unconscious bias. And I think we need to look at those, study those, because it is in these that I feel that we will find some path to progress. However, you know, based on all of this, good governance dictates that given that talent is everywhere, there must be a path to ensuring that women are put on board. There must be a path because the dichotomy has led to researchers looking at how to solve this problem, where women boast academic achievements, women boast a high level of achievement in terms of middle and senior management, yet still they are not placed in the position of being on boards. I believe companies, it is definitely clear that companies and economies will benefit more, despite all the research that says financially there's no link or there's weak link. Women on boards will make the economy, I think, gallop faster than it even is doing, and we will find faster solution to world problems and economic advancements. One of the problems that have been identified for the slow pace of change in recognizing and providing equal space for women on corporate boards is that, as I said, of unconscious bias, which is best defined as prejudice or unsupported judgments in favor of one group or another. Research has shown that it begins even before the nominating committee. So we talk about the nominating committee on the board, and this is a place where, you know, you look at the candidates, but it begins even before that. It begins where persons and the structure dictates that those persons who are looking at the pool are already looking towards their own. And so when the nominating committee gets these applications, when they look at them, they are looking now at issues such as the level of the candidate's experience. They are and then they see it does not, in respect to boards, it does not exist for the women. Then the experience, but then the question is asked, therefore, how will women get on board if the experience is not yet garnered? Hence, a circuitous reasoning relating to the insistence of experience as a qualifying marker. So we really are going to have to look on what is the criteria for the nominating committee as well. It all goes back to mindset, which we must collectively try to reprogram, and also the structures that we need to re-examine. In a prominent company, and I won't call the name, a male director was heard to have remarked that insisting and assisting more women on board mean that it is more likely that there would be more talking. While this director was bold to verbalize this sentiment, it is one that is unfortunately shared by a silent majority and confirms the bias dynamics. Supporting the argument of unconscious bias is also information that reveals that the input to the nominating committee also holds the selection game, and typically when boards and CEOs make their recommendation, they usually select their cultural and demographic clones. Therefore, the combination of unconscious bias and closed circuit network, which is usually men, mean that the board nominating committee are likely to recruit new members from existing personal networks, which may be demographically homogeneous. Studies have also revealed that there is still some question about the effectiveness of women on board, especially given that they are in the minority on boards. Their voices are usually drowned out by male dominance. That's something we have to look at. What is clear, however, is that many women have made it to the board based on assistance of their male counterparts or their financial holdings in companies. Consequently, given that these are areas through which success have been achieved, yes, through male counterparts and through financial holdings, investments, they are worthy of examining further to further the cause. I've done a global scan with you because what I'm speaking about here is no different in the globe than it is in the Caribbean. We all experience these hardships, these struggles in terms of women getting on board. So what we're experiencing in the Caribbean is typically what is being experienced in the globe. I want to take you to the United UN Sustainable Stock Exchanges, to which the Jamaica Stock Exchange is a member. And they recently conducted a study titled Gender Equality on Corporate Boards. And they analyzed 2,200 issuers on 22 stock exchanges in the G20 countries. Gender equality is one of the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So we are all on board here. And the reason stock exchanges were used as a point of analysis is that the data would provide an accurate or quite accurate representation of corporate boards, and equally, stock exchanges can play a pivotal role in promoting equality in the market by either rulemaking process, programs, training, or just a conversation. We all understand too, legislative changes are some of the things that we want to look at in terms of looking at both sides of the equation. Going back to the UN policy brief, it provides an analysis of gender equality on corporate boards of top 100 issuers by market capitalization on G20 exchanges. In summary, the analysis records the percentage of women on boards, whether the individual countries have a mandatory market rule, they looked at that, the percentage of women chair, and the percentage of women CEO. The data is expected to serve as a benchmark for exchanges on their efforts to promote gender equality in their markets. And I'll say what the data reveals. Now, the data reveals as on average, women hold 20% of board shares in G20 markets. Women hold 5.5% of chairs and 3.5% of CEO positions. And these are some small percentage. And Euronext Paris has the highest, and they have a quota system, percentage of women on boards at 44.3%. Johannesburg has the best gender balance on boards with 28.5% of any developing country in the G20. And I'll talk about Shenzhen Stock Exchange has the most female CEO, that is 11 of the top 100 companies of any G20 market. And Australia has the most female chairpersons, 14 out of the top 100 companies. 6 of the 22 market surveys has rules requiring a mandatory number of women on corporate boards. And I go there to come back to the Caribbean. In the Caribbean, we have so far used moral suasion, training through conferences and workshops, training for board directors, best practices awards, as the Jamaica Stock Exchange has, and tools such as the JSE Corporate Governance Index to propel the advancement of this very important plank in our development, underscoring the fact that women must have an equal place in corporate boards. We are not asking for token. We are not asking for persons to consider if you do not have the worth, but equality is equal to the fact that in terms of your knowledge, in terms of education, in terms of what you have trailed and blazed, you deserve an equal place on the board. In short, we are not short of considerable efforts in the Caribbean to sensitize and keep the equity and fairness conversation going. We believe it is resonating across the corridors of the board. I heard an earlier discussion, and yes, I believe it is resonating across the board through obvious, though not obviously at the pace we would want it to be. But I have some good news. As the JSC, the Jamaica Stock Exchange, we have tracked 92 listed companies on our exchange. And if we use the Jamaica as a proxy for the Caribbean islands, the data reveal that in the Caribbean, when benchmarked to the G20 countries analyzed, we are making progress. Commendation must be given to all who, whether in government, legislations, which are pending, private sector, NGOs, corporate governance institutes such as this, commendation must be given for having brought to the attention the fact that gender equality matters in the home, in the school, in the boardroom, as it improves governance. Of the 92 companies listed on the exchange, the total number of directors on the 92 companies equal 670, of which 167 are female directors and represent 25% of all directors. This means that Jamaica, and as I say, I'm using it as a proxy in terms of Caribbean, ranks above the average of the G20 markets, where 20% of the women hold board seats. We are 25. When compared to the G20 benchmark, however, we are 1.5% below the 5.5% of women holding the chairperson position, because we stand at 4% of women on the boards holding the position of chair. The Jamaican market is, however, above the G20 average, with 14% of CEOs being female, which is 13 CEOs of 92 companies. That's positive. This is especially revealing and positive for us in the Caribbean, as from the UN Sustainable Development Survey, none of the G20 countries have a ranking of as high as 14%. While the UN Sustainable Survey did not speak to the top 10 shareholders, which include female, I want to go there because I think it is worthy of examination and mention, as this could reduce the bias about women in business and assist with changing not only the narrative, but improving the percentage of women representation on boards. Women need to get into having that asset owning companies. For the Jamaican market, only 10% of female is within the top 10 shareholders of the 92 companies on the market. There is a call, therefore, for women to invest more and take considerable larger blocks in companies on the markets to improve access to the boardroom through ownership. So I'm also saying that there's an ownership position too for women to do for themselves, apart from education and getting to the CEO position, own and get into the boardroom through owning companies. The JC's findings so far shows that we can be proud of our achievement when compared to the G20 benchmark, but that stripping away at the overall global achievement, there is lots more to be done. Women need to be placed further in the conversation and in the mindset of many of our male counterparts, because we know that through male as well, we are going to get the changes. Given that all the other boxes, we see that we are ticking all the other boxes have been checked, which allow us without reservation or favor to take an equal part at the board level. Those have been fulfilled. So the getting into that conversation, getting into the networking, again, continuing to talk with a male, again, talking about investment, those are some ways that we will propel our cause. The needle must be moved as we continue to work at making gradual but impactful changes. Some of the areas for improvement and consideration are encouraging. We have been doing that, I think, as a stock exchange, as a country, encouraging firms to implement voluntary targets. Voluntary targets work. Also, mandatory targets work, but mandatory targets cannot be a token mandatory target, or else it will fail. Having one woman on board cannot work. It has to be a substantial mandatory target if we are looking at it. In the Caribbean, based on the JC's analysis of our listed companies, we have done reasonably well with voluntary moral suasion. Through our best practices awards, which promote good governance and examine how well companies incorporate gender balance in their operation, we have also pushed the needle with the JSE Corporate Governance Index, which scores companies on a scale of 1 to 3 on board composition and examine whether the range of qualification, experience, and competence are diverse and spans across, gender, industry knowledge, and age. One is not asking for an unnatural pass for women. We are saying that equality demands that there is a seat. Through our ladies at high tea, we have that too. We have encouraged women to be more active and create a network of both men and women at corporate and board levels, and advance through mentorship, very important, and corporate governance training. Training is going to be very important. We have that, and we have seen that more women are taking up that training. And what we are doing is also publishing the result and women and sending them to companies to say, this is a pool that you can choose from. Let us just be real about it to say that if men are the agent of resistance or change, we need to engage them more in these sessions, these women at height. You can't leave them out. Let them hear what are the issues that we are having. We need to engage them more in these sessions so that they can understand women's issues and even take a role of mentorship and introduction into this closed circuit. Recently, a high-profile female shared that the path to success will continue to be challenging if we don't recognize that women leadership is an awful thing to squander. It is. We cannot have such a high percentage of women trained, such a high percentage of investment that has been made in women, and we do not therefore reap the return on that investment. It doesn't work. The female leader, she concluded that we each day have a duty to change the future, to transform the future. We must invest in the present with purpose, passion, and persistence. And I want to underscore persistence. Keep knocking on that door. What will make that ram scram? He kept knocking that dam because he had high hopes. And we must create more flexible, especially in times of COVID here now, more flexible, friendly, and caring environment that promotes gender diversity, as well as establishing inclusive mentorship opportunities and performance reviews that value work-life balance, well-being, and mental health, which are essential ultimately for women. And I'm going to include men's development, because it is in that the circle will close. I believe we should narrow the gap between the psychology of equity and a change in mindset to repopulate our corporate boards with competent women leaders. Let us make women leadership a norm on corporate boards and a national and regional priority. Let us make leadership of women, I want to say that again, a national and regional priority. Finally, let us, as Ellen Roosevelt stated, start at home in our sphere of influence. Women who have been given the opportunity must mentor other women up the ladder. Ladies and gentlemen, the fact that you are in this conference means that you are an agent of change. You are change makers, so let us lead. Let us make this happen. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Marlene. What an absolutely passionate and amazing contribution you have made here. And I know quite a lot of our participants will be interested in hearing this again, and also particularly getting information on the statistics which you shared. Just to let everyone know, you will all be getting the links to the recordings. You'd be able to go through it again. And Marlene, we'll ask you to share your speaker notes with us as well, if you don't mind. So we would be able to also share some of that information with our participants. So thank you so very much. And I will now hand over to Nigel, because, you know, I'm starting to feel a little sad. We are less than an hour away from completing our opening segment. Nigel, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce our panel and engage in the second panel discussion this morning.
Thank you, Kamala, and thank you, Marlene. That was powerful. That was on point. I love the metrics. The metrics are important because what gets measured, as we know, we have heard it many times, what gets measured gets managed, what gets managed gets done. So for the panel, we have Catherine Kumar. Catherine held several leadership positions and was also the first female leader at organizations such as the RBTT Bank Limited, where she was president and country head, the inspector of financial institutions at the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, and chief operating officer of a local insurance company, Algico. She's the first female president of both the American Chamber of Commerce and the Bankers Association of Trinidad and Tobago. She's a fellow banker like myself, and she has chaired the Caribbean Group of Banking Supervisors. She has a BSc in Management Studies from the University of the West Indies and is a fellow of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. In retirement, she remains actively involved in voluntary coaching for the development of female leaders, very important. And she's a member of the board of one of our local banks. Elizabeth, as she said, known as Liz, is the CEO and principal consultant of Casper Investments Incorporated, a consultancy with over 35 years experience in management and insurance. She is based in Guyana, but her services extend throughout the Caribbean and Central America. She has a unique approach to customer service training and training the trainer and leadership series for both public and private sector organizations. She spent a lot of her career in the insurance industry at the Guyana and Trinidad Mutual Life and the Life Group of insurance companies for over 25 years. She has an executive MBA from UWI Cable and is a certified master trainer. And last but certainly not least, we have Connie Smith, Managing Director of the Tricor Group's operations located in Barbados. Tricor acquired the Corporate Administration Services Division of Ernst & Young Caribbean in April 2007. Prior to this, Connie was a partner at Ernst & Young Caribbean and was responsible for the development and management of Ernst & Young's Caribbean office in the BVI, the British Virgin Islands, for a number of years. She has served as president of the Barbados International Business Association twice and is currently still a director and chair of that organization's Service Providers and Business Facilitation Committee. She's a chartered governance professional, a fellow of the Chartered Governance Institute of the UK, chairman of the Barbados branch of the Chartered Governance Institute, and a member of the Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners. So we have a very qualified panel for those who may have any questions. So I'll hand it over to Catherine to kick us off. Marlene raised some very, very interesting topics, and I like what she said: purpose, passion, and persistence. You have to keep your shoulder to the door or it will slam back in your face. Catherine.
Thank you, Nigel. Good morning to all. Well, we have heard now from two very powerful opening speakers, and we have heard the previous panel, and I know that what we are going to say here, a lot of it will probably be repeated because it's the same common issues that we face throughout. And Marlene, I have to say that I agree with you. It would be such a pity if we as women allow the opportunity we have now to be wasted and squandered and not use it to advance women. I know that the challenges we face on gender parity, whether they're on boards or actually even at C-suite level, wherever, is no different whether we're in New Zealand or here in the Caribbean. And therefore, it's good that we could cross over all these different jurisdictions. I'm just going to, in the short time I have, talk about some examples of my experience on boards and present some recommendations on some of the issues. And I say it's important that we get through this and ensure that we say, yes, it matters whether women are on board if we really want to have successful companies. I myself have been on a few boards, whether state, private, NGO types of organization. And some of my experience, I say, dates back to the ancient ages, given my age, right? But I have found that over the years, things were very, very slow in moving. But certainly, I could say within the last 10 or maybe even before that, I am beginning to see changes as more and more companies accept as part of the governance model. And as far as globally, you know, there is a talk about gender diversity and setting fixed parameters. And companies are now concretizing that as part of their governance and part of their KPIs and ensuring that women representation on boards is an achievement for the company. What I found, I just want to share this quickly yesterday while listening to the post conversation after the Federal Reserve press conference, and they were talking about the respect of how labor impacts on inflation. And one of the key indicators they were using was participation rates for women in the labor market. So we see that at all levels, even at looking at inflation, participation of women is something that the world is looking at. My first experience on a state board was at Petrotrin, and for those outside, Petrotrin is our largest, maybe largest state company, but certainly the largest energy sector company in Trinidad and Tobago. When I joined, it was just 2 females on the board, and at that time, the murmur was really about, well, they're friends of the politicians, right? And I mean, it was really very embarrassing. And I really wondered instead, why wouldn't the murmur be more about, well, why were only 2 men appointed on such a large board? And I recall initially that we were not even taken seriously. And it appeared that our role was more about what somebody said before, nitpicking the minutes and correcting this and correcting that. And they actually called our names and asked us for corrections, you know. Another thing I found was a common thread was about talking about how you look and how you dress, and why not more meaningful conversation other than how I look? You don't talk to a man about how he looks and how he dresses, right? It really was a disappointment for me, being my first appointment on a large board and expecting a lot more, and not being understood as to what we could bring to the board. But as was said, you know, I'm a woman of determination, and I'm not going to sit down and allow people to just ride all over me. So I purposely did not allow that perception to continue for long. And I would make comments where need to be, well, shouldn't we have other views? Why just the woman's view on the minutes, you know? I knew that I had great value to bring to the board, and I was going to contribute towards making the company successful. And I had every right to be there as any of the male people sitting there. And I made myself visible and known as to what I could contribute. Well, I think that came across certainly, and the board saw my value, and the rest is history, because I was appointed to several subcommittees and to a particular important negotiating committee. And, you know, people began to see my value, and I saw the other things fall apart. I think what I also brought there that they saw very well was the emotional intelligence that I think women bring to boards or to any organization that they sit on. And that certainly contributes towards positive outcomes when you come to negotiations in particular. Thereafter, my next experience I want to share was on the American Chamber of Commerce. I was invited to join the board, and yes, by a male, so I'm thankful to that male that he invited me. At that time, I was a lone female director. And what was very striking is that I was the only person who was at a non-CEO level. In other words, I was just at an executive level, and everyone else on the board were at CEO level, owner of their company, and in some cases, very large international companies like Amoco, etc. So needless to say, I was intimidated. It was a little different from being on the state sector board. And I found that I had to get into it. And somebody told me, Catherine, try to walk in your own shoes. Don't try to walk in the shoes of the other male. And that was good advice that I took with me for a long, long while. Walk in Catherine's shoes. I must admit that the reception there also was different. I got support from a lot of the directors. And then in the following year, when I was there, I pushed for more female directors to be brought on, and they were brought on. As a matter of fact, one of those who came on at that time eventually became the second female president of the American Chamber of Commerce, and I was very glad to see her rise to that position also. I think that too often we see women rise to top positions, and as was said before, we don't look back or look out for other women and try to bring them in. It's as though we want to hold on to it for ourselves, and I must be the only one, the limelight must be on me. But why? Why? We have to encourage others and bring others on to the board also. You know, networking is another thing that is important, and that's one of the things I learned through my own company I was working at there. I remember when I asked this then CEO at my company, why is it that I can always act but never become CEO? He said to me, Catherine, outside of the insurance industry, who knows who Catherine Kumar is? And one of the previous speakers mentioned it before. The honest truth is, no, I couldn't pick up the phone and call the CEO of a Massey or the CEO of Republic Bank or so, right? I could call my counterparts in the insurance industry. And therefore, I made up my mind that I had to go out and network more and do all that I can to let people know about me and my ability. And the American Chamber of Commerce was an ideal opportunity to do that because of the number of committees, the number of companies you were involved with. And again, I think I used my female skills when I became president in working with all the committees, you know, getting to know them, being involved, going to their meetings, whereas previous presidents may not have attended the committee, subcommittee meetings, getting to know staff below this very senior level who are on some of these committees, and helping them along and helping them to understand what they needed to do in order to be able to advance. I think that has been my modus operandi throughout my career at all levels, working with others. I mean, I remember sitting at the desk of persons late into the night when we were doing budgets and so, and throughout that, people really recognizing Catherine really cares about me. And in that way, they actually open up a lot and share their personal life. And whilst you don't have to, I think that helps you as a leader to understand what that particular person is going through, you know. One piece of advice I want to also give besides the networking is how important it is for us not to be too intimidated and to realize that we have to jump into the deep end. Have your support there, which is people around you who you know you would support, who would support you, but be able to jump into the deep end. I certainly believe that we match men in our skill set. Women, however, have a level of emotional intelligence not commonly seen in the male leaders, and therefore we have to use that. I just want to throw out some other things for discussion eventually when we get to the Q&A, and some more points on that. Evidence has certainly shown that companies which strive for gender parity are more successful than those which do not. I know that just now it was said that we don't have that scientific evidence, but I think if you talk to companies who have women, they would be able to say that. So how do we globally and regionally achieve this gender parity? Effective corporate governance requires that we bring all the skill sets needed to effectively run the company. Again, evidence has shown that we need the skill sets of both male and female in an organization. One challenge men often note is the scarcity of available females at leadership levels. And there is some truth in this, as most of the leaders of organizations who are indeed men look to men because they're looking to CEOs to fill the board positions, all right? And CEOs in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean generally more so are men. So we need to start looking beyond the CEO level. Look at the C-suite level. Look at even those below. Look at individuals who are running, women who are running their own businesses successfully. And yes, they are not the large companies, but they have a lot to contribute. And there are a pool of women outside there, I think, that we are not tapping into. Women need to form organizations and to join organizations that can help them. I was a co-founder together with another person of an organization called the Powerful Ladies of Trinidad and Tobago. And this was our mission, to really bring more middle-level women, help them to rise to executive level, to board level, give them the tools that are necessary, help them to network some more and to become more involved and to help build a database that could take us to when somebody asks us to recommend people to go on board, we know who the women are and who we can bring on board. So yes, there's a lot more that I can add. I know that we are running out on time. I just want to say that women, we have to take some of the blame for not being on company boards the way it should be. We must not just play the, well, it's not my fault, it's not my fault. Go outside, network, let your voice be heard, become known, right? Don't say, I have to run home to the children, I have to run home to cook, I don't have time for these extracurricular activities. You got to do it. Find the right partner when you're getting married. Before you get married, make sure he's the right partner to support you in your vision and in your career. Get advice where needed. All of this is important. So for all the women out there who are not on a board, but would like to be considered, I put this to you. Is there anything that you can do to make this happen? I say if gender parity is to happen anytime soon, it is up to us women to make this a realization. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Very inspiring. Liz, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Nigel. Now I'm so inspired. I'm hearing all of the previous speakers and I'm listening and it's kind of chipping away of some of the things that I've noted to make, but I'll make some of them anyway because I wanted to be on the score. But before I start, I certainly like to say thank you to Kamala and all the others who arranged this conference. I think it's timely and I think it's also showing us that there's a lot more that we need to do as women as well. But a special thanks to Kamala for asking me to be part of this session. And, to take Professor Robert Barrett's word of shining, Kamala is a shining example of why gender matters. And since you have taken over the role of CEO, you have transformed CCGI in just a few short years. And you know the saying, there's three kinds of people: those who wait for things to happen, those who make things happen, and those who wonder what just happened. Kamala, you're definitely the one who make things happen. So this conference, I know, has been your dream realized. To pull it off, I know a lot of hard work went into it, and you injected your passion and you made it happen. And this is a winner. Congratulations. Now, I would also like to say a special thank you to a woman who's in the audience who introduced me to CCGI, Rani Narez. She introduced me many years ago in the early years of CCGI. So thanks, Rani, for introducing me. And I know Rani is a staunch supporter of governance. And now, having served on both private and public sector boards for many years, and I'm the sitting chair of RF&G Life Insurance Company in Belize. And, it has been an interesting journey for me, I must say. I feel very strong about women's views. And yes, I think we've made many strides over the years. We still have a far way to go. And, breaking the marble, I call it a marble ceiling now, not the glass anymore. It's just a marble ceiling. Gives a good feeling. But I am, when I'm in the role to make a selection of someone for a particular role, to me, it is about who can do the best job despite their gender. So I still would like to, recognize men for what they bring to the table, but I keep looking out for women as well. But, women continue to be unnoticed, and I list some of the points. I'll share some of my thoughts on that. In the areas of promotion, household chores, this whole homeschooling has been placed directly in the lap of mothers, grandmothers, and aunties. Even in this era, women are still seen as unwage domesticated workers. And I recall an incident attending an interview by a board of directors for a CEO position of a company that I'd worked for many years, and being asked a question, which I felt was a sexist question, really. How will I manage my family life and travel duties? Well, that really floored me. I kind of chuckled and paused and thought, I don't think I'll dignify that with any kind of response. The silence was deafening in that boardroom. And the then CEO, who I knew personally and who would encourage me to apply for the position, he responded to say that Liz has been traveling for this company for many, many years. And a thought crossed my mind based on that question that was put out by that director, that he didn't even do his research. And there and then I decided this is not the board I would like to work with. I'd already started to plan my exit strategy and I left anyway. But that was quite an experience. And how did I respond? I never felt rejected. I felt empowered. I moved on to form my own company that even got negative responses from both male and females. why leave an executive position to start from scratch? But you know, they say with the greatest risk, you get the greatest reward. I never look back, and I continue to do consultancy for the very company that I moved on from. Some of the things that I like to point out here this morning is I think we sometimes tend to be our own enemies. And truth be told, I have never been recommended to serve on a position on a board by another woman. Sad, strange, but true. I've never been recommended. It's always my male colleagues that has recommended me. And yes, like many of the other women, I find myself alone, you know, on many boards as the only female, or very few, if not just two females. But I must say that I am admired and supported by many women, and I do serve as a mentor to many. I actually have a mentee all the way in Malawi, who I mentored through a connection to our Commonwealth Youth Mentorship Program. And, you know, we shared a lot. I learned a lot from her, and we're still friends. But that was quite an amazing experience for me. And I continue to try to mentor women who have approached me, because not all women want to be mentored by other women. Yes, like I said, we are our own enemies sometimes. So I think one of the ways that we can break this cycle is by mentoring. I think this was mentioned before, recommending and encouraging women to serve on boards. We need to see ourselves as equal, because, you know, like was said before, there will be things that are harsh, and it's said, I just throw it over my shoulder. I don't really take it on. I look past the invisible barriers. I encourage women to find their voices and speak out when necessary, because I do, and sometimes too much. And opt out too, if you're not comfortable. You must, you know, be brave enough to say this is not something that you will tolerate, and you just opt out of it, and not sit by and take it, because, you know, you will not be doing yourself any justice. You'll be stifling your conscience, and you're also not an example to other women. I like personally to be taken seriously, and I have a problem if I'm not taken seriously. And if I do serve on boards, I prepare a lot. And you know, I want to be taken seriously. And I also want to enjoy my experience as well. Secondly, I think we downplay our strengths. I do that sometimes. You know your strengths. You know, for instance, men generally ask for an increase in salary. Very few times women ask for an increase in salary. They wait to see what is given as an increase. We need to take and be ready to take opportunities when they present themselves. We can't provide the strong and decisive leadership that some thought only men could provide. I can tell you that, because just look at the countries where the leaders were women in the pandemic, and you would see the decisiveness, the decisive leadership that created the better outcomes in those countries. My last point is on women who shy away from leadership roles and even board positions on the basis of family commitments. I know there are women out there who are moms and who focus on their children and their spouses. But there are many examples of women who can do both, especially with the support of their partners. And somebody mentioned that just now, they're having the right partner. And that's, Kamala, another topic I think that we should explore at some point in time, are the supporting partners. Look at Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is a mother of 5 children who was a housewife for a considerable amount of time. She literally moved from the kitchen to Congress, from a housewife to House Speaker. So it just shows if you dream it, you believe it, you can actually achieve it. I certainly wish to congratulate all the moms out there. Yes, it is a multitasking wonder. But I have to say, it's not about managing people. It's all about managing your time. Often a lot of persons ask me, Liz, how you get so much done and you do so much? How do you get so much done? And you still have to cook, you still have to garden, you go on vacation, but you have to manage your time effectively. In closing, I would say to all women, know your power, be authentic, have a good moral compass, go out there fearlessly, fight that fight. Once you get into that arena, you would know what you care about. You would know how to get the job done. And you have to be able to take a punch, and trust me, as Camille said, throw a punch as well. Most importantly, do not be afraid to draw strength and support from others around you. And so I end by saying learning is a lifelong journey, and we learn every day. You learn until you die. And I hope these few points would inspire women to take up roles and inspire other women to inspire women to ensure that they get on boards, because people do ask me a lot of times, how you get on so many boards? And, you know, I often say, well, people ask me or recommend that I go on boards. Sometimes, you know, the response when I ask, why did you select me? Is like, oh, well, we're looking for a strong woman who's been successful in her career and who has strong leadership qualities. So those are some of the things I've seen. Some of the questions that are asked there is, you know, showing that strong leadership quality, making sure your voice is heard, networking. All of those things are things that women can do to make themselves be seen and be heard. So thank you. That is my not 2 cents. That is my 22 cents. Thank you, Nigel.
Thank you very much, Liz. Connie.
Wow, to follow all of these wonderful comments and offering up some great information. Kamla, let me express my thanks as well for being included in such a surround of amazing people. And I think that you've done a great job. And I love that there's so many common threads in all of the discussions that we have been shared already today. And a lot of that is because we are sharing. And something that we probably don't do enough of to encourage other people. Now, Nigel, I'm going to pick up on something that you said at the beginning, which was a summary of a couple of Marlene's comments, and that was on purpose, passion, and persistence. Mm-hmm. So I think that in my latter years now, I'm appreciating that things happen to me for a purpose. So I had my children quite late in life. I had my first child at 40 and my second child at 43. And they're both girls. And I think that I had those at that stage for a purpose. So a lot of the work that I do now is for women because I have 2 young children and 2 young, very strong females that I'm trying to raise to be independent and forward thinking, and also to not just accept status quo. Mm-hmm. So I think that all the work that I've done before, that was always very important to me. And I worked as a partner of Ernst & Young. Nigel, you were a former colleague, and you would appreciate that we operate in a very male-dominant environment. As a partner of Ernst & Young, there were probably 6 females out of 23 partners for the region. And I would never, and I still do this, whenever my husband asks, what do you want for your birthday, for Christmas, for your anniversary? I want a wife. And that started back in my Ernst & Young days. I want a wife because your wife is, how many of my male partners sat around our boardroom table and had wives who were no longer working or had never worked in a different environment? And I'm going to stick a pin and come back to that in a bit. But how many of the female partners around the table juggled home, juggled their extended families, juggled the office, and in trying to make it seem seamless, we took on everything. So I wanted a wife. I haven't actually got a wife yet, and it's still on my wish list for every other thing that I'm celebrating. So maybe one of these days, Santa Claus will put it in my Christmas sack. I'm patient. But in saying all of that, I would also say that the purpose that I serve for my children is a very important one. And in doing that, I've been able to associate myself. And we talked earlier about brand. So my brand is important to me. I don't say yes to everything. So yes, I may sit on a number of boards, and I am often asked the question, how do you sit on so many boards? But truthfully, I actually don't sit on a number of boards. If I said yes to everything that I was asked, I would be spread so thin, I wouldn't know what to do. So I'm incredibly selective about what I want my brand to be associated with. And it is always associated with things that give me passion and purpose. And it's going to be women's empowerment because of my children, and it's going to be sustainability because of my children. So there's a thread, and the persistence that I bring to that is it is all driven because of my children. And honestly, if I can be very honest, I had my children late because children were not on my radar. I was so committed and married to my career. I never thought that I wanted children. I never wanted to be married. It was just never something that occupied my thought process. Giving yourself the opportunity, and a late bloomer, and you never know what will happen. But I think that in the discussion around supporting partners, I think that we also have to appreciate that no one is an island, and yes, it takes a village. So while we may want to go out and network and we may want to take on a lot of things, there are lots of other women and lots of other help that we can buy in to help our economy grow as well. So we need to be able to have our village support where we can call upon, even if it is a paid support, someone that is trustworthy so that you can get on. And I think that's an important lesson for your children as well, to understand that they too can juggle and they too can make a difference, not necessarily by dropping everything or saying no to everything because we have to be home for our children. My children are incredibly important to me, and I spend a lot of time with my children, but I think it is an important lesson to teach our children that you can do lots of other things and you can juggle and you can say no to some things as well. And you don't always have to be there for them physically as well. Now, in empowering women, I serve as a founding member of the International Women's Forum here in Barbados. And through that network, I have touched women who are in the C-suite of their organizations globally. It is an amazing opportunity. And it is one that makes us realize that you're actually not that different. So we think that being able to sit on boards or being able to juggle lots of things, we wonder about how we're going to do this. And it's because we don't share enough. So we all have the same doubts. We all have the same thought process. And I think in sharing a lot of what we actually feel and being more authentic about it, lets other people realize and other women realize that they too can overcome some of the hurdles that we have put in our space ahead of us without even subconsciously thinking about it. And I think that we have to be a lot more authentic about our experiences and let people normalize a lot of that discussion that is occurring really in our heads and nowhere else. It occurred to me actually sitting around a table with Sharon Christopher many years ago. I was sitting around a table with women and we were talking about all kinds of amazing women's initiatives. And I sat back and I wondered, why am I here? Why was I invited to be part of this discussion? I don't know, these women are doing such amazing jobs. And then there's me, I'm the only private sector person here and I don't understand it. And then I realized that there was an organization that I am the deputy chair of, and it's called Aspire. And Aspire's work is all about making charities more sustainable. But if I think about the Aspire's work, over 90% of the charities that come to Aspire are all started by women. So they come up with the most amazing ideas and they see that there is a need. They don't quite know how they're going to be able to achieve it, but they're going to jump in while juggling 600 other commitments because there is a need. And that I think is incredibly powerful because you may jump in with both feet, not entirely sure how you're going to be able to achieve it, but you are so incredibly passionate and persistent about trying to achieve a goal and making the world a better place for you and for others. And I think that again, not unwittingly, you find over the time you've been able to associate yourself and your brand and your guidance star with things that line up in your purpose, your passion, and your persistence. So I'm going to be rather brief because I imagine that there are quite a lot of questions. And as I said, I can easily associate myself with comments that Sharon made, with Marlene made, with Philip made, with our own panel here, Catherine and Elizabeth, with Robert as well. We all have had very, very similar experiences. And it is these sort of four where we can come together and talk about those threads, talk about the commonalities, and to demystify a lot of the things that, as I said, we hold very dear in our heads and clear that furniture out and clear that space out and make room for some new growth and new opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Connie. So I think we had a very, very powerful discussion. So I have two questions, and Marlene, feel free to jump in with the rest of the panel. One is, we talk about diversity, and I believe this, diversity improving performance, gender diversity, ethnic diversity, religious diversity, experiential diversity, geographical diversity. How do we measure the impact? So that's one, because I think we need to convince the naysayers. And the other one is going back to purpose. Do you think that You see, we can assume that men know, or some men know, that they are being men. Maybe they don't. And how do we educate? How do we engage them outside the boardroom, maybe? And for me, that's an important role of the chair, to help them to understand why they should not be doing what they're doing, or what they can do more of. Thank you. Feel free. Anybody want to jump in?
Nigel, if I can say that I think we in the Caribbean are actually in really in a sweet spot, because when we talk about diversity, we talk a lot about gender diversity regionally and internationally, but really in the Caribbean, even if I look across the landscape today, here we are in a very, very blended environment. So when we're talking about diversity, I think that it is not only about minorities, because I think truthfully, we are probably all in our own little minority spots. And so it is gender and diversity, but I think that the other sort of diversity that I want to include in our discussion is cognitive diversity. I think that where we need to lead the conversation is not to fill quotas as it relates to ethnicity or gender, but I think because we provide services, we provide goods, be it retail, we provide whoever our audience and our market is, it is an amalgam of all kinds of people and all kinds of thoughts. And it is only with the inclusion of cognitive and truthful diversity that are we going to really actually achieve what the best options that we can for people. And I think that in the environment now that we have with the pandemic, we've had raging trade wars globally. We've had lots of inequalities that have, the bandage has been pulled fiercely off of, and we in the Caribbean have been associating ourselves with some of those global sort of marches and riots about inequalities. And I think we have a real opportunity to take a step back and right a lot of the wrongs. And the richness of the conversation has started, and I think that diversity has to be included at the fullness of it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would like to add, Nigel, yes, on the diversity part and how do we measure. That's always a very, difficult thing to do. But I remember when we were first forming the Caribbean Corporate Governance Institute in Trinidad and Tobago, in the Caribbean. And one of the things when we went out to members, they asked, well, how can you show that, good corporate governance and following certain standards and so improves my organization in any way? Particularly family-run organizations were talking about that. All you come in to do is give me more work to do, prepare this report, etc., etc. I have enough to do with auditing already. But we were able to show, that from good corporate governance, simple things like when you approach the bank, you can get a better rate of interest because the bank is seeing that you have good corporate governance in place, right? And I think in finding metrics that will help us if we have women on boards, and I would put this back to the Institute as something that they could work on. Probably look at companies without women, companies with women, find 4 or 5 measurable targets that we can measure and track it over a period of maybe, 3 years. And I think through that, there's no other individual. We need a body to do it. We need a body to do it, and we need a test case, and we need companies with and without. And I'm sure that you will be able to, within the Caribbean, to pull something together and to show that diversity helps and adds to the success of an organization.
Liz?
Right. Yes, sure. Certainly, Nigel, that's kind of a tricky question, but it is a clear economic case that more women on board, more women in executive positions, more women in management teams, the better the returns, the better results, and the better profits. So I believe that it is imperative that more women are needed to be included on the table. But like Connie said, when she opened up this discussion, based on your question, we need to engage men. We need to engage men and to share with men our own concerns, because I think a lot of times we don't. We don't share our concerns. I think managers or companies really need to take diversity on board, diversity and inclusion. as something higher, very high on the agenda in itself. But I really believe that change can happen, and you know, garnering statistics and comparing or making a comparative positions can really give us an idea of if you're making an impact. We all know that while a lot of women have broken that marble ceiling, as I call it, it is still very few. It is still very few. It's too few, really. I mean, you can literally count it on two hands or one hand that women have not been, you know, making it up the ladder. I mean, I find myself extremely fortunate to be surrounded by men who has been extremely supportive, you know, serving as a chairman and being appointed as the first non-family chairman in a family-run company, to me was mind-boggling. I never aspired for the position. I should have, really. And again, sometimes we sell ourselves too short. But it was the men who said, Liz, you are the one to take on this role. You are the one to take on this role. So I have been very fortunate, I must say. And I think it is because I speak out when I need to be, when something needs to be said. I obviously chose my battles. I speak out, I'm listened to, I'm heard, and some of what I've said have been implemented. And that really gives me a lot of power. I feel totally empowered to do that. But we have to collect statistics in order to make a comparative position, to really measure the impact that is going. And it takes the Institute. The Institute can be a powerful place to start, Kamala. I know it's more work for you. Thank you.
She's not afraid of work.
I know.
Can tell you that.
Tell me about that.
I want to address the question posed by one of the participants. He says the role of the chair in getting all to participate is covered. However, the role of the male members on the board is also very important, and frequently the culture of male dominance plays itself in the boardroom. As a woman chair of a board, I am struggling with this. Any advice? So let's start with you, Liz, since you're a woman chair.
Well, you know how I handle this. We've had, you know, in a company that I serve, and in the same company that I serve as chair, we had a female CEO who was Jamaican, very strong person. And I always remembered when she was retiring. I mean, I really had to sit the board down. We were all other males and let them know this woman has brought a lot of value to the table, and we need to recognize her for that. But I have a lot of conversations. I have pre-board meetings. Once we're on site in Belize, I have pre-board meetings with my directors to set the tone and stage, because I really don't like long meetings. I don't like long meetings. And the meetings used to go on prior to me being chair for hours, as long as 5 hours. I'm like, not going to do this. So I have pre-board meetings with my directors, which are all male directors. And that really paves a really good way for an easy move, and for them to always remember and recognize that females do bring that emotional intelligence that was mentioned that men doesn't have. Because I had to really caution them. You know, they wanted to, like, she needs to retire, let her go, and you know, no, she's going to get the best, because you know what, she gives the best. She gives the best, and she has to get the best. So having your voice heard and having that engagement and that conversation, I think a lot more male members of that particular board has recognized the importance and value of women. And I'm hoping, fingers crossed, to change that, to bring, I know 2 male members will retire soon. So on my agenda is to make sure that we get at least 2 female members on the board. But engagement is key, and having that conversation and not feel threatened. I think a lot of women feel threatened. They feel afraid to say something because it may be rejected. But so what if it's rejected? You say it, and somebody will hear you at some point in time. You make your point and make sure it is recorded in the minutes as well. I always tell women that, make sure whatever you say is recorded in the minutes, because sometimes it comes back to haunt the very people who did, you know, moved away from that particular decision. So thank you, Nigel, for asking me.
And then we'll go to Catherine.
I think that one thing that I have also learned is that we don't value time enough. So I think that setting the tone at the beginning of your tenure is important. So managing people's expectations and setting the tone at the top. So for me, at every meeting that I chair, I always say to them, so we're going to be here for an hour and a half. We're going to go through the agenda with some rapidity. And my expectation is that you've done your work. So you're not turning up to the meeting with being prepared, because I'm going to call you out on that. And I think it is I don't know if it is a Caribbean thing or it is a Barbadian thing, but I think that we don't value our time enough. And we are quite prepared to allow people to waste our time in frivolous conversation and listening to themselves at boardrooms. So I think that we need to be strong enough to call people out and to know when to stop. So it's good to be able to listen, and it's good to be able to give people the time. But I think that you need to be able to set the tone and to be rigid about that. You have to be rigid while being flexible.
Thank you. Catherine?
Yes, the difficulty with the question you've asked is if we have boards that are all, by and large, the chairs are male and most of the board members are male, how do we get to change that male-dominated culture within the boardroom where they operate a certain way? And I mean, the answer has to come back to the fact that we need more training via institutes, right? Companies have to make it imperative that board members go to training. It's not a voluntary thing. You have to remain on the board. You have to do training. And also, as was said even earlier, you know, the fact that we want board members who are certified also in governance. But the more we bring women onto boards also, we will see a change if these women are strong and forceful. And when something happens, not be afraid, even if you do it privately afterwards, because you probably don't want to do the whole forum, but privately after, directly to the member, or if you're, you know, intimidated and going directly, at least go to the chair and say what you didn't like as far as how something was done. I was shut down, or somebody said before, I made a point, but you totally ignored me and you went to the mail and you said, you know, he made the same point. Why didn't you recognize me? So we have, as women, we have to be a lot more forceful. And I think not be afraid to speak out where we're not seeing it happening and help to change that culture. And it is only through that that we will eventually get to where we want.
Thank you very much. Time is valuable, as Liz says, and I'm very respectful. I try to be very respectful of time. Marlene, do you want to wrap us up?
Not really, but I wanted to add to something Catherine has said about women in the boardroom, because I just want to add my own experience. You have to also be a subject matter expert. When you get to that boardroom, just listen and then see what the others, I don't know, you might say it's competitive, but listen to what the other board members are saying. Know the issues and go and study them. Because when you do that, when you get to that boardroom, you speak with authority. You know, that is very important. And people know who would not normally want to listen to you because you might be the lone voice, will have to sit up and say, well, she understands it. Let us start to listen to her. So afterwards they say, so what do you think about this, Marlene? You know, that subject matter expert. Women have to take that on. So that is what I want to say. And in respect to the unconscious bias in respect to men, I'm going to appeal now to the Institute to do some training. A subject must come up, a training session for men in terms of the unconscious bias. If we do that, I think we will also move the needle in terms of men understanding. Nothing is wrong with having a bias, but you have to understand that you have that bias and how you are going to work directly to change it to the betterment of all concerned. So, and the final thing, and Catherine, Elizabeth spoke about it. I think we have to look at other measurements. McKinsey will talk about the financial, they don't see the correlation in terms of the financial impact. But I think we're moving away from that in terms of looking only at the balance sheet data. And we have to look at other metrics, other measurements to see how effective women are on board. And the importance of even where the emotional intelligence is. And we look at social and we look at caring. but how does that impact the wider society? We have to look at that, bring in a holistic view to see the impact of women on board. That's my 22 cents.
Thank you very much, Marlene. And for me, I couldn't agree more that the metrics have to be much more than financial. The financials are the result. We need to, and in the balanced scorecard fashion, we need to be looking at the metrics that drive performance as opposed to just the end result. Kamla, I think I will hand it over to you. I want to thank the panel, powerful panel. I would like to thank Marlene. Great job. And we look forward to those metrics. And I'm certainly, I'll be up at 3 a.m. for the other two sessions. So I think this was a brilliant start. Kamla.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Thank you, Liz, Connie, Catherine, and Marlene, of course, you know, really, really great job. We are past 10 minutes past our end time. So I don't want to keep you guys anymore. Know that we will respond to your questions and comments in the chat. Expect an email from us. I want to now invite for the closing remarks, Jane Valls, who's the Executive Director over at the Gulf Institute, if she would just wrap up the session and remind us of the next segment next week. Jane?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kamla. I hope that you can hear me because the electricity is going on and off here at the moment where I am.
Yes,
I'm on
so
my little island of Mauritius, so I'm thinking of you in the Caribbean as well. Listen, what a wonderful session. And Kamla, thank you so much. You're such an inspiring leader yourself. And it's been a super pleasure to work with you on this, but also with the other institutes. So Sheila, Carly, Kirsten, Palmy, what a pleasure it's been and what a great start we've had for this first session. I think thanks to Kamla and her team for hosting this. Thanks to the teams that we can't see, but who've been doing all the work behind the scenes all around the world. But thank you also to all the wonderful speakers and panelists we had today. We've heard your energy, we've heard your passion and your wonderful role models at all of you. And thank you so much for that. I think I've taken so much away from this, but the moral imperative to be the change that we want to see has stuck with me. And I think also the need to bring more men to the conversation. I think we all have a role to do that. Our next session, just to remind you, is the 5th of August, and it's going to be hosted by the Gulf, by Mauritius and South Africa together. And the topic is women on board. So we're going to continue the conversation, but move it on to the next stage of that conversation. We've got a wonderful lineup of speakers. You set a very high standard already, Kamla, but we hope that you'll all join us for the next session on the 5th of August. And then the last session, the 11th of August, being hosted by New Zealand and Hong Kong. So Kamla, thank you so much. You've been an inspiration today. I'm on the ceiling. I've really enjoyed every moment, and thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the day, or a good night if that's where you are getting into bed right now, or settling in for the evening. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next segment. Bye.
Okay, Kamla, you're doing cartwheels now, right?
Yes, I'm very happy. Thank you.
You're doing cartwheels now?
You can go and get some
excellent session. Nigel, you're a great moderator. I mean, you asked the punchiest of questions.
Yes, I think Nigel took us through very efficiently. Very well done. Looking forward to
I have the pleasure of working with experts, so it's and Philippa did a great job kicking us off, so fantastic stuff.
Yes.
And we're so lovely to have met you all. Great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Well done, everybody. Bye-bye. Have a great day.
I will be up at 3 a.m. I didn't think that I would, but I think after today is like I've got to be up at 3 a.m. next week.
Right. You want to be part of the discussion, yes.
Take care, then, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Kamala, you can go take a nap now.
No, actually, I have another meeting that's going to start in a few minutes.